This whole video is basically just going to be me trying to remember times of my life that I can't remember at all. So that'll be fun for everyone, I'm sure. Hey howdy, welcome back to my channel. As I'm sure you know, it is back to school season. Today is my first day back at college, and so I thought it would be a fun little video if I told you about some of my favorite books that I read when I was in school. Obviously, I have been in English for my whole life. I took a lot of honors and AP English classes because that was always my favorite subject, naturally. So I read a lot of books for school, as you can imagine, and I wanted to go over some of my favorites. I grouped them into my different years that I was in public school, so elementary, middle school, and high school. And I do have a bunch of books that I really liked from college as well, but I figure if anyone wants to see that, I'll make it into a separate video. So let's get into it. The first category is books that I read in elementary school. These ones we're gonna really dig deep on because I don't remember elementary school very well at all. I do remember some books that I read that I really loved. So the first one that I read that I really enjoyed is Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this book or read this book. It is about dogs. It is very sad. I definitely cried at the end of it. The next book that I really enjoyed that I read in elementary school was Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Patterson. I'm sure everybody has seen this movie or read this book. It is super emotional, but super magical and heartfelt as well, and I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was really beautiful, and I thought the imagery of the bridge to Terabithia and Terabithia was really beautiful. So I liked it for that reason. Another book I really liked in elementary school was a book that I never hear anybody else talk about, so maybe it was just my school that read it, but we read a book called The Egypt Game by Zilpha Keatley Snyder, and it was a book about these kids that just played a game where they pretended they were in ancient Egypt, and they found an ancient Egyptian artifact or something like that, and that made their after school game or whatever. And I just really liked it. I remember really liking the characters and liking the whole concept of the game in general. Another one of my favorites was From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E.L. Konigsberg. This book was another book that I never hear anything about. I had trouble finding some of these books because I could remember words in the titles, but I couldn't remember the full titles, and they were so hard to find. But this one is about some kids that run away to a museum. I don't remember what they're doing in the museum or why they're at the museum in the first place, but they get there and they go on some kind of adventure, and they are also solving this mystery of someone named Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. And that's all I remember from it, but I remember really enjoying it and really liking the mystery aspect of it. And then we move on to middle school, of which I was only able to think of a few books that I really enjoyed because I don't remember middle school really at all. It's just not there. And so I had to look online for books that they require that you read in middle school, and then based off of that I picked out some ones that I liked. I read Flowers for Algernon in middle school, which I really liked. I'm kind of surprised that we read this book in middle school because it is such a emotionally powerful book. But it's another very sad one. Sticks with you for sure. And I don't actually remember if we read all of it or if maybe we just read part of it for school. But I really liked it. I really liked the story and the characters. Flowers for Algernon is by Daniel Keyes. I forgot to say that. The other book I really liked in middle school is a book that I think everybody in middle school really enjoyed, and that's The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This book is about a group of boys who are in a gang, and it's in the 60s, and they're greasers, and it's just an absolutely darling book. The characters are all so good. The movie is so good. If you want to watch a good movie, go watch The Outsiders. I fucking love that movie. And I love Ponyboy, and I love Johnny, and I just absolutely adore that book. I would 100% reread it now. And I really should reread it because I really enjoyed that one. The other one I really liked seems kind of juvenile for us to read in middle school, but we read Rikki Tikki Tavi by Rudyard Kipling, which is I think one of the most underrated classics for sure. Like, everyone hears about the Jungle Book. But Rikki Tikki Tavi is where it's at, man. That book was so good. And also, I just love the phrase Rikki Tikki Tavi. I think I might name my child Rikki Tikki Tavi. No, I won't, but it's a good option. Also, in middle school, I remember we read The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and I absolutely loved that book. I loved it because of its spookiness. That was the first, like, horror-y story that I really ever read, and I fell in love with it, and then I've been reading horror books ever since, so clearly it was influential on my reading. And I just thought it was so spooky, and I loved the concept of, like, a beating heart that isn't actually alive. I loved that. Also, in middle school, we read a book called Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeiffer. This is a book, once again, that I don't hear anybody else having ever read in school. It was one of our summer reading books for one year. And it's a book about the end of the world. Basically, something happens and the moon gets knocked closer to Earth and it throws all the tides off. The whole world starts to crumble. And so it's about these people that are trying to survive the apocalypse as the world kind of slowly dies. And it was super interesting. I know it's a series. I never continued on with the series. I just read the first one. But I did think it was really entertaining, and also I remember as a kid really liking the romance that was in it too, which now I think I would probably dislike that because, come on, it's the end of the world. Do we really need to be making that our priority? But I remember really liking it as a kid, so I will give you that, and you can do with it what you will. And then we hit to high school, which obviously happened the most recently, so I remember them the best. I know a lot of people, like, they read books in school and they don't like them just because they're school books, but I was not that kind of person. Like, any book we picked up in school, I just thought of it as like another book, like another opportunity for something for me to love. And so I loved reading books for school. I just thought it was so fun. I've always loved deep reading, so I loved answering the questions afterwards and like underlining quotes that I wanted to use for essays later on. I'm such a nerd at like listening to myself. I'm just like, oh my god, you're so lame. Anyway, so I was a huge loser in school, basically. And the books that I liked in high school were Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Hamlet is one of my favorite William Shakespeare plays. I love the ghost and I love Ophelia. And those are the two reasons I love Hamlet. The second book that I really loved in high school is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. When I read The Great Gatsby in high school, I had already read The Great Gatsby once prior to this, and so I was happy to do a reread of it. I'd be happy to do a third reread of it. I think it's super good. The writing in it is just beautiful. The whole story is beautiful. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald just is really where it's at. Another book that I read that I really enjoyed in high school was The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. I read this for an independent project we had to read like a coming of age book, and so the one that I picked was The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, and I loved this book. A lot of people really hated their books for this project because a lot of them were older books, and everyone was like, oh, I don't want to read an older book. It's too confusing. But I just loved this book. It's a coming of age about a woman who's coming of age in the early 1900s, and it's just about her life and her suitors. I just thought it was really good. Another one that I really liked that everybody else hated was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. This is a very dense book, so I get why a lot of people didn't like it, but I personally have always loved Great Expectations. I love the kind of gothicness of the whole novel, and I love Miss Havisham as a character, and I just like the whole story. I like the whole adventure. There is like I don't remember if it's the second or third part, but it kind of dies in that little bit for me, and I think it's a little bit unnecessary, but overall I did really like the book. Another book that I absolutely love, I actually have on my shelf here, is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I have this amazing edition from Barnes & Noble because I love this book so much. Lord of the Flies is about a bunch of kids that are involved in a plane crash and are left on this island to fend for themselves. things get crazy, things get barbaric, and it's so freaking good. If you haven't read Lord of the Flies, then you should read it, because it really is one of my all-time favorite classics for sure. God, this edition is so good. I'll give you a nice full shot of that. And then another book that I love, that I also happen to have on my shelf here in the exact edition that I read in high school, is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This book I read my freshman year of high school. It is also another great book. I watched the movie first and I really enjoyed the movie, and then I read the book and I just thought it was really great. Kind of a book that's set in a town that is similar to a lot of towns in Montana, so I think that's why it connected to a lot of the students that I personally went to school with. So I enjoyed this one as well. I really enjoyed The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I liked it better than Of Mice and Men, even though a lot of people didn't like it better because it's so long. But I thought it was great. A lot of people in school, I remember, thought the ending was really bizarre, and I won't spoil the ending for you, but I thought it was very symbolic and really wrapped up the story, brought it around in a 360 manner, and I just liked that book a lot. And then the next book that I really enjoyed in high school, this is one that I'm pretty sure we only read at our high school, because even if you look on Goodreads, I think it has like 160 reviews. Like, it is not a popular book, but it is called Until They Bring the Streetcars Back by Stanley Gordon West. Stanley Gordon West, I believe, he's from Montana, or he lives in Montana or something like that, which everybody in Montana is very big on. Like, if you have done anything of note and you live in Montana, they're gonna study you in school, basically. And so we read this book because of that, and it was a very mature book. I would definitely put a trigger warning on this one for themes of rape, incest, family violence, domestic violence. So if you don't want to read about those things, don't read this book, but it was a super, super good book. And there are scenes in that book that just have stuck with me for my whole life and will continue to stick with me for my whole life. Specifically, dead baby in a freezer. I remember it being very mature, but like everybody in class loved it because of that, because it had these themes that we weren't really used to being exposed to in school, and it is also very well written as well, and I believe it was a series as well. I only ever read the first one. I also really enjoyed The Crucible by Arthur Miller. Who doesn't love The Crucible? Witches. It's a play, so it's really easy to read. I just liked everything about it. My last favorite book that I have to share with you from when I was in school, and that's A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare as well. I loved A Midsummer Night's Dream because I had been in the actual play at a local theater earlier that year that we read it. I played Puck, the main fairy guy, the trickster fairy. And so I got to read that part for the whole class, and I already knew the material, and it's one of my favorite Shakespeare plays for sure. Definitely my favorite Shakespearean comedy. I usually like the tragedies better overall, but if I had to pick a favorite comedy, I'd pick A Midsummer Night's Dream. So that is all I have for you guys. Those are my favorite books that I read in school. If you liked this video, you can give it a like, and if you are interested in knowing what books I liked that I've read for college, then comment below. If you want to give me a subscribe, then you can subscribe. There's almost 20 of you now, so we're really getting up there, getting the double digits. I hope you are having a good day. Bye.